The moment Walter Bowen answered that call at 3:03 a.m., the empire he'd spent 20 years building began to crumble. The voice on the other end wasn't one of his enforcers. It wasn't a rival making threats or a debtor begging for mercy. It was a woman who dialed the wrong number, a nurse named Sarah who had no idea she'd just reached the most dangerous man in the city. What Walter didn't know as he grabbed his keys and walked into the rain was that this wasn't a wrong call at all. It was destiny's first move in a game that would cost him everything and save the one thing he'd forgotten he still had, his soul. It had been a quiet Wednesday night for Walter. Well, as quiet as things got for a man who controlled half the city's underground operations. After dismissing his security detail, he'd retreated to his penthouse, 30 floors above the world he ruled, surrounded by glass walls and carefully curated silence. He stood alone with a glass of scotch, reviewing ledgers that detailed transactions no government agency would ever see. The weight of his empire pressed down on his shoulders like an old scar that never quite healed. The phone call at 3:03 a.m. had shattered the silence like a gunshot. This wasn't his regular line. This was the private number, the one only 5 people in the world had access to, the one that only rang when blood had been spilled or was about to be. He answered with the clipped authority of a man who expected immediate answers. "Speak." Instead of the controlled voice of one of his lieutenants, he heard crying. "Please, I think someone's outside. I can hear them at the door." "I called the wrong—" "Who is this?" Walter demanded, his mind already calculating threats, breaches, and security. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." The voice broke between sobs. "I was trying to reach my brother. I must have. Please, they're trying to get in." Something in her voice, the raw, unfiltered terror, cut through the armor Walter had worn for so long, he'd forgotten what it felt like without it. He'd heard fear before. He'd caused it, weaponized it, profited from it. But this was different. This wasn't the fear of someone who knew his world. This was the fear of someone innocent stumbling into the dark. He'd been there once, a lifetime ago, helpless and terrified when his younger brother bled out in his arms while sirens wailed in the distance. No one had come for them then. No one had answered when they needed saving. "Listen to me, Barn," Walter said, his voice shifting from threat to command. "I'm not your brother, but keep this line open. Where are you?" After a moment of hesitation, she gave him an address, a rundown apartment complex in the industrial district, the kind of place where police sirens were background noise and people learned not to ask questions. "Lock yourself in the bathroom. I'm coming," Tony said. After ending the call, Walter stood motionless for 3 seconds. 3 seconds where every rational part of his brain screamed at him to ignore this, to hang up, to let the world handle its own problems, like he'd learned to do decades ago. Then he grabbed his jacket and keys. He didn't call his security team, didn't alert his enforcers, didn't follow any of the protocols that had kept him alive this long. Instead, he walked out into the rain-soaked night, questioning what the hell he was doing the entire way. Who abandons their fortress at 3 a.m. for a complete stranger? Who risks exposure for a misdialed number? But he couldn't shake the sound of her voice, terrified, alone, human in a way his world hadn't been for years. When he arrived at the address, the building was exactly what he expected. Crumbling concrete, flickering lights, the smell of rust and neglect. He took the stairs 3 at a time, his hand instinctively moving to the weapon holstered beneath his jacket. He found her on the 4th floor, pressed against her apartment door, barefoot, phone clutched in her trembling hands like a lifeline. Her eyes were wide with terror until they landed on him. Then confusion flickered across her face. "You're not," she whispered. "No," Walter said, scanning the hallway with the practiced efficiency of a man trained to see threats in shadows. "I'm not your brother." He noticed the scratches around her door handle. Someone had tried to force entry but hadn't finished the job. Either they'd heard him coming or they'd gotten spooked. He made a mental note of the fire escape at the end of the hall. "You came anyway," she said, and something in her voice, gratitude mixed with disbelief, made his chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with danger. "You asked for help," he replied simply, as if that explained everything. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in 20 years, someone's gaze didn't hold fear, calculation, or deference. She looked at him like he was just a man who'd shown up when she needed someone. Like he was someone worth trusting. Sarah, she said softly, offering her name like a peace offering. Sarah Eaton. Walter. He didn't give his last name. I didn't need to, not yet. Come on, he said, gesturing toward the stairwell. This building isn't safe. I'll take you somewhere you can breathe. She hesitated for only a moment before nodding, following this stranger in an expensive suit who'd appeared like an answer to a prayer she hadn't quite spoken. What Walter didn't realize as he led Sarah Eaton down those rain-slicked stairs and into his car was that she wasn't just any nurse working the night shift. She was the last person to see a dying courier, a man who'd whispered a phone number with his final breath. His number. And the men looking for her weren't random thugs. They were his men. The wrong call Walter had answered wasn't a mistake of fate. It was the beginning of a war he'd wage against his own empire. For the first person in 20 years who'd made him remember what it felt like to save instead of destroy. But that would all come later. For now, as the city blurred past his windows and Sarah Eaton sat silent in his passenger seat, Walter Bowen made a choice that would unravel everything. He decided to care. The rain hammered against the windshield in rhythmic waves, filling the silence between them. Walter kept his eyes on the road, but his peripheral vision tracked every movement Sarah made, the way she clutched her phone like a talisman, how she flinched at every passing headlight, the shallow breathing of someone still trapped in fight or flight mode. "Thank you," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. "For coming. For believing me." Walter's jaw tightened. "You want to tell me what happened?" Sarah exhaled shakily, tucking a strand of damp hair behind her ear. "I'm a nurse, night shift at Memorial Hospital downtown. My shift ended around 2:30, and I thought I was just tired, paranoid." She paused, swallowing hard. "But someone followed me home, a black sedan. They waited until I got inside, then I heard footsteps in the hallway. Heard them testing my door handle." Walter's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. "You live alone?" "Yeah," she nodded. "My brother usually checks in, but he's been out of state for work." I panicked and tried calling him, but I must have misdialed in the dark. I don't... She turned to look at him, confusion creasing her brow. "Me. I don't even know how I reached you. What number did I call?" There it was, the question Walter had been dreading. "Doesn't matter," he said curtly, navigating through an intersection where street lights cast orange halos in the mist. "You reached someone. That's what counts." It was a non-answer, and they both knew it. But Sarah was smart enough not to push, not yet. Instead, her gaze drifted downward, and that's when she saw it. The slight bulge beneath his tailored jacket, the unmistakable outline of a shoulder holster. Her breath caught. "You're not a cop, are you?" The question came out smaller than she probably intended. Walter glanced at her briefly, and for the first time that night, the ghost of a smirk touched his lips. Not even close. The silence that followed was different, heavier, charged with unspoken questions. Sarah studied him with the clinical assessment of someone trained to read people under pressure. The expensive suit that didn't belong in her neighborhood, the controlled movements of a man comfortable with violence, the phone number that shouldn't exist. "Should I be scared of you?" she asked quietly. Walter considered lying. It would have been easier. Safer for both of them. "Probably," he admitted, "but not tonight." What would you do in Sarah's position? Trust a dangerous stranger or take your chances alone? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. The city gave way to quieter streets as Walter turned into a private garage beneath a modern glass building. The kind of place with security cameras, key card access, and enough discretion to house secrets. "Where are we?" Sarah asked, anxiety creeping back into her voice. "Somewhere safe." Walter killed the engine and turned to face her fully. "Just until morning, I'll have someone check your apartment, make sure whoever was there is gone. Then you can go home." "Just until morning," she repeated, as if testing the words for truth. "You have my word." And strangely, impossibly, she believed him. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the way he'd shown up without hesitation when she'd been terrified and alone. Or maybe it was something she saw in his eyes, a flicker of the man he used to be before he became whoever he was now. Walter led her through the underground entrance to a private elevator. No buttons, just a fingerprint scanner. The penthouse it opened into was all clean lines and controlled elegance. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the sleeping city, minimalist furniture that looked expensive because it was, and a silence so complete it felt like stepping into another world. "Guest room's down the hall," Walter said, shrugging off his jacket. "Lock the door if it makes you feel better. Don't open it for anyone but me." Sarah stood in the center of the room, looking small and out of place against the stark luxury. "Why are you doing this? You don't know me." Walter paused at the bar, pouring himself 2 fingers of scotch. The question hung in the air between them, one he wasn't sure he could answer honestly. "Maybe I'm tired of knowing only the wrong kind of people," he finally said. It wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't a lie either. As Sarah disappeared down the hallway, Walter moved to the windows, watching the rain streak down glass like tears. His phone buzzed. 3 missed calls from Marco, his lieutenant. Business that couldn't wait, but for the first time in 20 years, Walter Bowen let them wait. Because somewhere in his carefully controlled world, a variable had appeared that didn't fit his calculations. A woman who'd called the wrong number and found the one man who couldn't walk away. If you're hooked on this story, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, what happens next will change everything. And if you think you know where this is headed, you don't. What Walter didn't see in that moment was the photograph tucked in Sarah's phone case. A picture of her treating a patient 3 nights ago. A wounded man who'd whispered numbers with his dying breath. The same numbers she'd accidentally dialed tonight. Fate, it seemed, had a very specific plan. And neither of them were ready for it. Sunlight woke Sarah, harsh and unfamiliar against her eyelids. For a disorienting moment, she forgot where she was. Then the events of the night crashed back. The footsteps outside her door, the trembling call to the wrong number, the man in the expensive suit who'd appeared like something out of a fever dream. Walter. She sat up slowly, taking in her surroundings with the careful assessment of someone still not entirely sure she was safe. The guest room was minimalist elegance. White linens, dark wood furniture, a single piece of abstract art on the wall that probably cost more than her annual salary. Everything was clean, controlled, expensive, just like the man who owned it. The penthouse beyond her door was empty, silent. Just floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing a city that looked different in daylight, smaller, less threatening, almost peaceful from 30 floors up. On the nightstand, she found a note written in precise, controlled handwriting. "You're safe here. Don't open the door for anyone. WBU." Sarah folded the note, running her thumb over the sharp creases. Who writes notes like this anymore? Who shows up at 3 a.m. for a stranger and then disappears before dawn without explanation? What kind of man had she called? She wandered through the penthouse, her bare feet silent on cold marble floors. The space felt more like a museum than a home, beautiful but unlived in. No family photos, no clutter, no warmth, just carefully curated emptiness. Then she saw it, tucked behind a crystal decanter on a shelf, almost hidden, like someone had meant to throw it away but couldn't quite manage, was a photograph. 2 boys, maybe 13 and 16, arms slung around each other's shoulders, both smiling in a way that looked unpracticed, genuine. She recognized Walter immediately, even years younger. Same intense eyes, same sharp jawline, but softer somehow, less haunted. The younger boy beside him had a familiar face, something about the shape of his smile, the angle of his cheekbones, but Sarah couldn't place where she'd seen him before. Have you ever seen a face that feels like a memory you can't quite reach? Drop a comment if you know that feeling. The sound of a key card at the door made her jump. She quickly replaced the photograph just as Walter entered, carrying a bag from what looked like an expensive cafe. "You're awake," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "You left." It came out more accusatory than she'd intended. "I don't keep breakfast food here." He set the bag on the counter, coffee, pastries, things that suggested he'd actually thought about what she might need. "You should eat." Sarah studied him in the morning light. He'd changed into a fresh suit, but there was something in the way he held his left shoulder, a subtle stiffness, a micro wince when he reached for the coffee cups. Her nurse's instincts kicked in before her common sense could stop her. "You're hurt." "I'm fine." "Your shoulder. You're favoring it." She moved closer, and he tensed. "Let me see." "It's nothing." "It's not nothing if you can barely lift your arm." She crossed her arms, channeling every stubborn attending physician she'd ever worked with. "I'm a nurse, Walter. I've seen enough people pretend they're fine when they're not. Let me look at it." For a long moment they stood in silent standoff, her determination against his control. Then something shifted in his expression. Not quite surrender, but close. "Fine," he muttered, shrugging off his jacket with visible effort. The wound was on his left shoulder blade, a bullet graze, maybe 4 days old, stitched by someone who knew what they were doing but hadn't been gentle about it. The area around the stitches was inflamed, angry red. "This needs to be cleaned and redressed," Sarah said, slipping into professional mode. "You have medical supplies here?" "Bathroom, under the sink." She worked in focused silence, cleaning the wound with steady hands while Walter sat rigid, barely breathing. This close, she could see the tension in his jaw, the white-knuckle grip on the chair arm, the way he refused to show pain. "You don't have to be so stoic, you know," she said softly, applying fresh gauze. "It's okay to admit when something hurts. I've had worse. I don't doubt it." She secured the bandage with medical tape. "But that doesn't mean you have to suffer through the simple things alone." Walter turned to look at her, and something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or confusion. Like he'd forgotten what it felt like when someone cared without wanting something in return. "Why are you doing this?" he asked quietly. "Doing what? Helping?" Sarah managed a nervous laugh. "I'm a nurse. It's kind of my thing. Plus you did save me from whatever was waiting outside my door last night. Consider us even." The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "Even," he repeated like the word was foreign. "Yeah, crazy concept, I know. People helping each other without keeping score." She started packing up the supplies, then hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" Walter's guard went back up instantly. "Depends. That photograph, the one with you and the other boy, who is he?" The warmth that had been building between them evaporated. Walter's expression turned to stone. "Someone I couldn't save." For the first time in years, Walter Bowen sat in his own home while someone looked at him and didn't see a boss, a threat, or a ghost. Just a man with scars he couldn't hide and wounds that went deeper than bullets. If you're hooked, hit subscribe, because what happens when Walter's past and Sarah's present collide will change everything. Trust me, you don't want to miss what comes next. And in that moment, neither of them realized they were already in too deep. The call came while Sarah was in the shower. Walter stepped onto the balcony, closing the glass door behind him as Marco's voice crackled through the encrypted line. "We found the leak," Marco said without preamble. "David Chen, the courier who got clipped by police on I-5 3 nights ago." Walter's grip tightened on the phone. Chen had been one of his, a low-level runner who moved packages and kept his mouth shut, until he didn't. "He was carrying evidence?" Walter asked, his voice ice. "Flash drive, federal informant manifest, wire transfer records, the whole package. He was running it to the Volkov syndicate when patrol spotted him." Marco paused. "But here's the thing, boss. Chen's phone records just came through our guy at the precinct." Moments before he crashed, he dialed a number. Walter already knew. The pieces were clicking into place with sickening clarity. "My number," he said flatly. "Your private line, the one we sweep monthly." Marco's suspicion bled through the phone. "How does a dying courier have your private number, Walter? And why does it match the same number that nurse called last night?" Walter's mind raced. Chen had been transporting evidence against him to the Volkovs. Chen had called his number before dying. Sarah had called the same number. Sarah, who worked night shifts at Memorial Hospital. Sarah, who treated wounded patients. "Where did Chen die?" Walter asked quietly. "Memorial Hospital, trauma unit, DOA at 11:47 p.m. 3 nights ago." The world tilted. Sarah had been there, had to have been. She'd treated Chen before he died, maybe even heard him whisper that number with his last breath. And when someone came looking for whoever Chen had talked to, they'd followed the only lead they had. Her. Boss, you still there? The men who went after the nurse last night, Walter said, his voice deadly calm. Were they ours or Volkov's? Silence. Then carefully, I'll find out. Walter ended the call and stood motionless, staring out at the city that suddenly felt like a chessboard where he'd miscalculated every move. Sarah's call hadn't been random. It had been a breadcrumb from a dead man, one final act of conscience or revenge, impossible to tell which. And now she was in his penthouse, wrapped in his protection, while his own empire might be hunting her. Have you ever realized you're protecting someone from yourself? This is where it gets complicated. Stay with us. When Walter returned inside, Sarah was standing at the kitchen counter, frozen, a newspaper clutched in her hands. The headline screamed in bold print, Underworld Kingpin Walter Bowen expands empire. Federal investigators circle closer. Below it, a photograph. Walter in a tailored suit outside a courthouse, his expression carved from granite. The color had drained from Sarah's face. You're... Her voice was barely a whisper. You're him. Walter didn't move, didn't deny it. Yes. The newspaper trembled in her hands. You're a criminal, a mafia boss. That's what they call me. She took a step back and something in Walter's chest twisted at the look in her eyes. The same fear he'd heard in her voice when she called for help. Except now, she was afraid of him. I trusted you, Sarah breathed. I let you, God, I thanked you for saving me, and you're the same man who showed up at 3 a.m. when you were terrified and alone, Walters interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. That hasn't changed. Everything has changed, she slammed the newspaper on the counter. Do you know what you are? What you do? Better than anyone. Then why? Her voice cracked. Why did you help me? Why show up for some random nurse when your world is... Maybe I wanted to remember what it felt like to save someone, Walter said, the words coming out rawer than he'd intended. Instead of destroying them, the admission hung between them like a confession. Sarah stared at him, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. Fear and something else, something that looked dangerously like understanding, warred across her face. I should leave, she whispered. You can't. You can't keep me here. The men who came for you last night? Walter moved closer and she flinched. He stopped, hating himself for it. They weren't random. You treated a patient 3 nights ago, a courier named David Chen. He died in your ER. Sarah's face went pale. How do you... Because he worked for me. And before he died, he gave you a number, my number. And now someone thinks you know something worth killing for. That's insane. I don't know anything. I'm just a nurse who's caught in the middle of a war she doesn't understand. Walter's voice softened. If you walk out that door, you won't make it to the street. Silence crashed between them. Sarah's hands shook as she gripped the counter's edge. So what am I? She asked bitterly. Your prisoner? Your responsibility? Your... My mistake, Walter said quietly. I should have hung up when you called. Should have let the world handle itself like I always do. But I didn't. He met her eyes, unflinching. And now we're both stuck with the consequences. Sarah laughed, a broken, hollow sound. You really know how to make a girl feel special. Despite everything, despite the fear crackling between them like static electricity, Walter felt that same strange pull in his chest, the one that had made him answer her call in the first place. 3 days, he said. Give me 3 days to figure out who's hunting you and why. Then you can walk away from this. From me. I give you my word. The word of a criminal. The word of the man who showed up when you needed someone. Do you think Sarah should trust him? Drop your answer below, and if you're torn like she is, hit that subscribe button, because this story's about to get even more twisted. Sarah closed her eyes, exhaling slowly. When she opened them, the fear was still there, but so was something else. Fragile, dangerous, impossible. Trust. 3 days, she whispered. Walter nodded, already knowing that 3 days wouldn't be nearly enough. Not to protect her, not to let her go, not to stop himself from caring about the one person who could destroy everything he'd built or save the man he'd forgotten he could be. The first photograph was taken at 6:47 a.m. through the penthouse windows from the building across the street. Sarah stood by the glass, coffee cup in hand, backlit by dawn. She looked small, vulnerable, ordinary. Exactly the kind of image that would raise questions Walter couldn't afford to answer. Marco Riva lowered the camera, a cold smile touching his lips. 20 years he'd been Walter's right hand. 20 years of blood, silence, and unwavering loyalty. But loyalty had limits, and Walter had just crossed his. Going soft for a woman. Marco had seen it before. Good men destroyed by their hearts, empires crumbling, because someone forgot the first rule: trust no one. He uploaded the photo to an encrypted server, then made 2 calls. One to Dmitry Volkov, one to a reporter who owed him a favor. By noon, Walter Bowen's world would be on fire. Walter sensed it before he saw it. The shift in the air, the too quiet morning, the absence of the usual check-in calls from his network. Then his phone erupted. 12 missed calls, 17 texts, all saying the same thing: we have a problem. He opened the news alert first, and his blood turned to ice. Mafia kingpin Walter Bowen, hiding woman linked to federal evidence. Below the headline, a photograph. Sarah in his penthouse, clear as day, time-stamped from this morning. The article was worse. Sources confirmed that Walter Bowen, alleged head of the city's most powerful crime syndicate, is harboring Sarah Eaton, a Memorial Hospital nurse connected to the death of federal informant David Chen. Investigators are questioning whether Eaton is a witness, accomplice, or hostage in Bowen's expanding criminal enterprise. The phone slipped from his hand. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "Walter? What's—" Then she saw his expression. What happened? He couldn't speak, couldn't find words for the catastrophic miscalculation he had made. He'd thought he could protect her quietly, handle this invisibly, like he'd handled everything else. He'd forgotten that in his world, nothing stayed hidden for long. Sarah picked up his phone, read the headline, and the color drained completely from her face. "Oh my God," she whispered. "My photo, my name. They know I'm—" Her breathing quickened, panic setting in. "My family, my co-workers, everyone will think I'm Sarah. I'm a target now," her voice crackened, "not just from whoever came after me before, from everyone. The police, the FBI, your enemies. I'm—" The penthouse door slammed open. Marco strode in, 3 armed men behind him, his face a mask of barely control. "It was everyone out," Walter said quietly, his eyes locked on Marco. The men hesitated, looking to Marco for confirmation. That hesitation told Walter everything he needed to know. When loyalty fractures, it happens fast. If you've ever felt betrayal coming, you know this feeling. Drop a comment and hit subscribe, because this confrontation is about to explode. "I said out," Walter repeated, his voice dropping to a deadly register. Marco jerked his head, and the men retreated. Sarah started to follow, but Walter caught her arm gently. "Stay." Marco's eyes flickered to Sarah, then back to Walter. "Really? She gets to witness this? You made her part of this when you took that photo." "I made her part of—" Marco laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "You brought a federal witness into your home, Walter. You compromised everything we've built because you wanted to play hero for some nurse who—" "Choose your next words carefully," Walter warned. "Or what? You'll defend her honor?" Marco stepped closer, voice dripping with contempt. "You've gone soft. The Walter Bowen I knew would have handled this the moment he realized she was a liability. But instead, you're hiding her, protecting her, acting like some lovesick fool." Walter moved. One moment he was still. The next, Marco was slammed against the wall, Walter's forearm pressed against his throat. "You leaked that photo," Walter said, each word precise and cold. "You sold her location to Volkov. You betrayed me." Marco smiled through the chokehold. "I saved you from yourself. By making her a public target? By reminding you who you are." Marco's eyes were hard, unrepentant. "You're not her savior, Walter. You're a king. And kings don't risk empires for—" Walter's fist connected with Marco's jaw. Once, twice. The sound of bone on bone echoing through the penthouse. Marco crumpled, blood streaming from his split lip. For a long moment, Walter stood over him, breathing hard, every instinct screaming to finish this, end the betrayal permanently. It's what the old Walter would have done, but Sarah's presence behind him, quiet, watching, changed the equation. "Get out," Walter said quietly. "You're done." Marco laughed, spitting blood. "You think sparing me is mercy? It's weakness. And in our world, weakness gets you killed. Then I guess we'll see who dies first." Marco pulled himself up, wiping his mouth. "She'll destroy you, Walter. Either she'll betray you or you'll destroy yourself to trying to save her. Either way, you're finished." He walked out, leaving a trail of blood on the marble floor. The silence that followed was deafening. "Walter," Sarah said softly, "he's right. I can't stay here. I'm putting you in danger. I need to leave." Walter turned to face her. "Go where exactly? The moment you step outside, every syndicate in the city will have you. The FBI will detain you for questioning. The press will follow you everywhere." "Then what?" Tears streamed down her face. "I just stay here while your empire falls apart? While people you've known for years turn against you because of me?" "Yes. That's insane. That's the situation we're in." Sarah shook her head, backing toward the guest room. "No, I won't be the reason you lose everything. I can't. You think I care about the empire more than—" Walter stopped himself. The words too raw, too honest. "More than what?" Sarah demanded. "Say it." He couldn't. The admission would make it real, make it vulnerable, make it something that could be used against both of them. So Sarah said it for him. "I'm leaving." She turned toward the bedroom to gather her things, and Walter felt something crack inside him. The same fracture that had started when he'd answered her call, the same breaking that had accelerated every moment since. But then she stopped, turned back, met his eyes with a determination that didn't match the tears on her face. "You didn't walk away when I was scared," she said quietly. "I'm not walking away now." That moment when someone chooses you despite the danger. Have you ever experienced that? This is where everything changes. Subscribe if you're ready to see what comes next. Walter stared at her, this nurse who should have been a stranger, who should have stayed a wrong number, who was supposed to be someone he saved and forgot. But she wasn't, and they both knew it. "3 days is up," she said. "So what happens now?" Walter looked at the blood on his floor, the news alert on his phone, the empire fracturing around him. "Now," he said quietly, "we fight." Outside, Marco made a call. "It's done," he told Dmitry Volkov. "He's compromised. The girl stays. Move on the shipment tonight. He'll be too distracted to notice until it's too late." Dmitry's voice was smooth, pleased. "And the nurse?" Marco smiled coldly. "She's a problem that will solve itself." The war Walter didn't know was coming had already begun, and the woman he'd saved would become the battleground. The silence after Sarah's declaration felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. "We fight." But Walter could see the tremor in her hands, the way she wrapped her arms around herself like she was trying to hold the pieces together. This woman who'd chosen to stay despite everything was unraveling, and he didn't know how to stop it. "Sarah, I lied to you," she said suddenly, her voice breaking. "Not about everything, but about David Chen." Walter went still. "What about him?" She sank onto the couch, her face buried in her hands. "You asked me what happened that night. Why did someone follow me home? I told you I was just a nurse who treated the wrong patient." She looked up, tears streaming down her face. "But that's not the whole truth." Walter sat across from her, every instinct telling him to brace for impact. "David Chen wasn't just a patient," Sarah whispered. "He was my ex-boyfriend." The world tilted. We dated 2 years ago. It was brief, intense, messy. He was charming, secretive. I didn't ask too many questions because I didn't want to know the answers." She laughed bitterly. "Classic, right? Love makes you blind." Walter's mind raced, recalculating everything. Chen had been Sarah's ex. Chen had been his courier. Chen had died in her ER. Nothing about this was a coincidence. He showed up at the hospital 3 nights ago, Sarah continued, her voice hollow, bleeding, terrified. The trauma team called me because he kept asking for me by name. When I got there, he grabbed my hand and said, "I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm sorry for everything." What did he mean? I didn't know. I thought he was delirious from blood loss. I tried to stabilize him, but her voice cracked. He was dying and he knew it. He kept whispering numbers, over and over, 10 digits. Walter's chest tightened. My number. Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. I thought it was my brother's number. David said, "Call this. When they come for you, call this number. He'll protect you." Then she couldn't finish. He died. In my arms, while I was still trying to save him. The pieces fell into place with devastating clarity. Chen had been running evidence to the Volkovs, betraying Walter's empire. But in his final moments, knowing he'd put Sarah in danger, he'd given her the one number that could save her. Walter's private line, the number only 5 people in the world had. The number Chen should never have known. How did he have my number? Walter asked quietly. I don't know. I didn't even know who you were then. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. I memorized the digits because they were the last thing he said. When someone tried to break into my apartment 2 nights later, I panicked. I dialed the number in the dark thinking I was calling my brother for help. But you called me instead. I called you. She met his eyes, raw vulnerability written across her face. David set this up. He knew someone would come for me because of what he'd done, and he gave me your number. But why? Why would he think you'd help me? Why would he trust you with, maybe he knew I'd protect you, Walter said, the realization settling over him like fate's heavy hand. Even from myself. Have you ever felt like everything that seemed random was actual destiny pulling strings? This is that moment. If you're hooked, subscribe because this story is about to go places you won't see coming. Sarah stared at him. What does that mean? Walter stood, moving to the windows, watching the city sprawl below, the empire he'd built on blood and silence. Chen worked for me for 3 years. Low level, but loyal. Or so I thought. When he went to the Volkovs, I assumed it was greed, betrayal. But if he loved you once, maybe he was trying to get out, trying to build evidence to take me down so he could walk away clean. Start over. Walter's reflection stared back at him in the glass, a ghost wearing his face. And when that got him killed, his last act wasn't revenge. It was protecting you, by sending you to me. That's insane. Why would he think, because 20 years ago I had a brother? The words came out harder than Walter intended. Younger, good. Everything I wasn't. When he got caught in the crossfire of a deal gone wrong, I couldn't save him. I watched him die, and it broke something in me. Sarah's breath caught. Chen knew that story. Everyone in my organization knows it. It's why I am the way I am. Walter turned to face her. Maybe he gambled that if you called me, terrified and alone, I'd remember what it felt like to lose someone I couldn't protect. Maybe he knew I'd show up. That's a hell of a gamble. Or destiny, Walter said quietly. You dialed the wrong number, Sarah, but maybe it was the right call all along. The air between them shifted, charged with something neither of them could name. Not quite trust, not quite love, but something fragile and dangerous and real. Sarah stood, closing the distance between them. You could have let me die. Could have ignored the call, hung up, walked away. But she didn't. No. Why? Walter met her eyes and for the first time in 20 years, let someone see the truth. Because I'm tired of being the man who destroys everything he touches, he said. And when I heard your voice that night, scared and desperate and human, I thought, maybe I could save someone for once, instead of being the reason they need saving. Tears slipped down Sarah's cheeks, but she didn't look away. David was wrong about a lot of things, but he was right about you. What do you mean? You're not just a criminal, Walter Bowen. She placed her hand over his heart, and he wondered if she could feel how it thundered beneath her touch. You're a man who still remembers how to be human, and that's worth fighting for. This is where everything shifts. When you see someone's soul beneath their scars, have you experienced that? Drop a comment and subscribe, because the fight is just beginning. Walter covered her hand with his, the gesture more intimate than any words. 3 days is up, he said. You could still leave. I know. But you're staying. Sarah smiled through her tears. Looks like we're both making terrible decisions. The worst, Walter agreed. Neither of them noticed the shadows moving outside the building, or the targeting laser painting red dots across the penthouse windows. Marco's betrayal had been thorough, and the reckoning was already at the door. The first bullet shattered the window before Walter could move. He tackled Sarah to the floor as glass exploded inward, the crack of sniper fire echoing through the penthouse. 3 red dots danced across the walls where they'd been standing seconds before. Stay down, Walter shouted, dragging her behind the granite kitchen island. More gunfire erupted, not just from outside, but from the hallway. The private elevator dinged, and Walter knew with sickening certainty they'd breached security. Marco had given them everything: access codes, guard rotations, kill zones. This wasn't a warning, it was an execution. How many? Sarah gasped, her body pressed against his, trembling. Walter assessed the angles, counting muzzle flashes. Too many. He pulled his weapon from the hidden compartment beneath the sink, checking the magazine with practiced efficiency. 17 rounds, against what sounded like a small army. Terrible odds. The penthouse door exploded inward in a shower of wooden smoke. 4 men poured through, tactical gear, silenced weapons, professionals, not street thugs. Volkov had sent his best. Walter fired twice. 2 bodies dropped. The others scattered, returning fire that chewed through marble and steel. The bedroom, Walter ordered, providing cover as Sarah crawled toward the hallway. Behind the bookshelf, there's a panic room. Code is 1027. Go! What about you? I'm right behind you. Go! But they both knew it was a lie. Sarah made it to the bedroom just as the windows facing the balcony shattered. Repelling lines dropped, more men descending like black-clad spiders. Walter counted 6, plus the 3 still in the living room. 9-1. He'd faced worse odds, but never with someone he cared about in the crossfire. Walter! Sarah screamed from the bedroom. He pivoted, firing at the repelling soldiers, buying seconds. One fell, his line snapping. The others returned fire, forcing Walter back into cover. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Should have killed her when you had the chance. M. Marco. Rage burned through Walter's veins, cold and clarifying. This wasn't just about the Empire or the evidence. This was personal. Marco was proving a point. Sentimentality gets you killed. Maybe he's right, Walter thought, ejecting his empty magazine and slamming in a fresh one. But I'd rather die human than live as a ghost. He fought his way to the bedroom, dropping 2 more hostiles. Inside, Sarah had the panic room open, a reinforced steel door disguised as a bookshelf. Get in, Walter commanded. Not without you. Sarah. An explosion rocked the penthouse. The kitchen erupted in flames, fire spreading with chemical precision. They'd used accelerants. This wasn't just an assassination. It was a purge. Burn away the evidence, the witnesses, everything. There's a tunnel in the panic room, Walter said, grabbing her shoulders. It leads to the parking garage 2 blocks south. Take my car. Keys are inside. Drive to... I'm not leaving you. You have to... No. Tears streamed down her face, mixing with soot and ash. You showed up for me. I'm not walking away now. We run together or we don't run at all. Have you ever had someone refuse to abandon you, even when staying meant danger? That's love. That's loyalty. If you feel that, drop a comment and subscribe, because what happens next will break your heart. Walter stared at her, this impossible woman who'd turned his world inside out. Every logical part of his brain screamed to force her into the tunnel. Lock the door, buy her escape with his life. But looking into her eyes, he saw something he hadn't seen in 20 years. Someone who saw him, truly saw him, and chose to stay anyway. Together, he whispered. They ran. The tunnel was narrow, concrete, lit by emergency strips. Behind them, gunfire and flames consumed the penthouse. Ahead, darkness and uncertainty. They burst into the parking garage, gasping. Walter's car sat in its reserved spot, sleek and black and fast. Then the elevator dinged. Marco stepped out, flanked by four armed men. Blood still crusted his split lip from their earlier fight. He smiled. Going somewhere? Walter pushed Sarah behind him, weapon raised. This ends now, Marco. Yeah, Marco agreed. It does. Let her go. Your problem is with me. My problem is that you forgot what you are. Marco's eyes were cold, empty. A king doesn't kneel for anyone, but you knelt for her. And I'd do it again. The admission hung in the air, raw, honest, irreversible. Marco shook his head slowly. Then you've already lost. His men raised their weapons. But before anyone could fire, sirens wailed outside. Red and blue lights flooded the garage entrance. Police, dozens of them, called by the gunfire and explosions. Marco's face twisted with rage. This isn't over. He and his men retreated into the shadows, disappearing like ghosts. Walter grabbed Sarah's hand, pulling her toward the car, but she stopped, her grip tightening on his. We can't run forever, she said. I know. So what do we do? Walter looked at the flames consuming his penthouse above, the empire crumbling around him, the woman who'd become his entire world standing in the wreckage. And he made the only choice that mattered. We fight back. If you're on the edge of your seat, smash that subscribe button, because the final battle is coming, and nobody is ready for how this ends. The war had begun, and Walter Bowen would burn his entire empire to ash before he let them touch her. But in the shadows, Marco was already making his next move. And this time, he wouldn't miss. Walter's seaside mansion was never meant to be a fortress. He'd bought it years ago as a place to forget, somewhere the city's noise couldn't reach, where the sound of waves could drown out the screams that haunted his sleep. Now, as he and Sarah arrived under cover of darkness, it would become his last stand. How long do we have? Sarah asked, staring out at the black water. Hours, maybe less. Walter moved through the house with mechanical precision, pulling weapons from hidden caches, checking ammunition. Marco knows about this place. He'll come. Then why are we here? Walter stopped, meeting her eyes in the dim light. Because I'm done running. Done hiding. If this is where it ends, I choose the ground. Sarah's hands trembled as she helped him load magazines. There has to be another way. We could disappear. Leave the country. Start over somewhere. There's no running from this. Walter's voice was gentle but final. Marco won't stop. The Volkovs won't stop. And I won't spend whatever time I have left looking over my shoulder waiting for the bullet I don't see coming. So you're just going to, what? Die here? I'm going to make sure you don't. Before Sarah could respond, headlights cut through the darkness. Multiple vehicles approaching fast. Walter grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the back of the house. The dock. There's a boat. When the shooting starts, you run. Walter. Promise me, Sarah. Promise you'll run. Tears streamed down her face. I can't. Promise me. I promise, she whispered. The door exploded inward. Marco entered first, followed by 8 men, all that remained of his splinter faction. His face was a mask of cold determination, the kind Walter had seen in mirrors for 20 years. I gave you everything, Marco said, his voice echoing in the empty room. Loyalty, brotherhood, 20 years of my life, and you threw it away for her. Walter stepped forward, weapon lowered but ready. I didn't throw it away. I finally figured what it was worth. Sentiment, weakness. Marco spat the words like poison. You got soft for a girl. Walter smiled faintly, a sad, knowing expression that held 2 decades of regret and 1 week of redemption. No, he said quietly. I finally got strong enough to care. Marco's face twisted. Then die weak. He raised his weapon. Walter fired first. This is it. The moment everything falls apart or comes together. If your heart is racing, hit subscribe, because what happens in the next 60 seconds will destroy you. The firefight was brutal, close quarters, unforgiving. Walter moved like he'd been born for this, each shot precise, each movement calculated. But there were too many. A bullet tore through his shoulder. Another grazed his ribs. He kept firing. Marco's men fell one by one until only Marco remained, bleeding from his leg, propped against the wall. Walter staggered forward, his own blood pooling beneath him. Both men were dying, they just didn't know who'd go first. "You should have killed her," Marco gasped, laughing through the pain. "Should have been smart." "Being smart got me 20 years of nothing," Walter replied, his voice fading. "She gave me a reason to be something more. And look where it got you." "Yeah," Walter smiled. "Look where it got me." He pulled the trigger one last time. Marco slumped forward, eyes empty. Walter collapsed. Outside, the sound of helicopters. Police, finally arriving. Red and blue lights painted the walls like a funeral. Walter dragged himself toward the dock, each movement agony. He could see the boat, Sarah standing beside it, her face twisted in horror. "Go," he tried to shout, but it came out as a whisper. Instead, she ran toward him. "No, no, no," Sarah sobbed, dropping to her knees beside him, cradling his head in her lap. "You promised. You said we'd fight. You said." "I did fight," Walter whispered, blood on his lips. "This is what winning looks like." "This isn't winning, this is—" Her voice broke. "You can't leave. Not now, not after everything." "Sarah," he reached up, touching her face with a blood-stained hand. "You called the wrong number that night. Don't, but you found the right man." Tears fell onto his face, mixing with rain that had started to fall. Dawn was breaking over the ocean, painting the sky in golds and pinks. Beautiful, indifferent, eternal. "I don't know how to do this without you," Sarah whispered. "Yes, you do." Walter's breathing was shallow now, each word a struggle. "You save people, it's who you are. Keep doing that." "Walter, please." "Thank you," he breathed, his eyes finding hers one last time. "For showing up, for staying, for making me remember." His voice faded, his hand fell, and Walter Bowen, king, criminal, and in the end, just a man who'd learned to care, died in the arms of the woman who'd saved him by letting him save her. If you're crying, you're not alone. Hit that like button through the tears and subscribe, because this story isn't over yet. Sarah's journey is just beginning. As sirens wailed and dawn broke over the water, Sarah held him, rocking gently, whispering words that no one would ever hear. The wrong call at 3 a.m. had led to this moment. Tragic, beautiful, impossibly human. And somewhere in the chaos, a phone rang. Another wrong number. Another person in need. The legacy Walter left behind wasn't an empire. It was a choice to answer. 6 months had passed since dawn broke over a blood-soaked dock. Sarah Eaton lived in a coastal town now, the kind of place where people didn't ask questions about the past, where the ocean was loud enough to drown out memories that surfaced at 3 a.m. She rented a small cottage overlooking the water, volunteered at the community clinic 3 days a week, wore Walter's signet ring on a silver chain beneath her scrubs, a secret weight against her heart. The federal investigation had cleared her, eventually. The evidence trail led back to Marco and the Volkovs, not to the nurse who'd been caught in the crossfire. The press had moved on to newer scandals. The city had forgotten. But Sarah remembered. Every morning, she walked the pier where fishing boats rocked in their slips and seagulls cried overhead. Every evening, she sat on her porch and watched the sun sink into the same ocean that had witnessed his last breath. She didn't call it grief anymore. She called it companionship. The presence of someone who'd changed her world in 8 impossible days. Have you ever carried someone with you long after they're gone? That's not loss. That's love. If you know that feeling, you're not alone. Drop a comment below. On a Thursday evening in October, as autumn painted the sky in bruised purples and golds, Sarah's phone rang. Unknown number. Her hand hesitated over the screen, heart stuttering the way it always did when memory and present collided. She answered. "Hello?" Silence. Then a voice, male, young, trembling. Is this Sarah Eaton?" "Yeah," she said carefully. "Who's calling?" "You don't know me," the voice cracked. "My name is Alex. I got this number from someone who said if I ever felt lost, if I ever needed help, I should call." Sarah's breath caught. "Where did you get this number?" "From a man named Walter Bowen." A pause. He saved my life 2 years ago. Found me bleeding in an alley after a deal went wrong. Could have left me there. Should have. I was just a stupid kid running packages for people I didn't understand. But he got me to a hospital. Paid for everything. Never asked for anything back. Tears blurred Sarah's vision. Before he left, Alex continued, he gave me a card with this number written on it. Said if I ever lost my way, if I ever needed someone to show up, to call. I lost the card, but I memorized the number. I didn't know if it would still work, if anyone would answer. I answered, Sarah whispered. I'm scared, the boy admitted. I got out of that life, but now my old crew is coming for me. They think I know things. I don't have anywhere to go. I remembered what he told me, that sometimes the wrong call is the right call. Sarah stood, moving to her window where the ocean stretched endlessly. She could almost hear Walter's voice in the wind, gruff, certain, impossibly gentle. You save people. It's who you are. Keep doing that. Where are you, Alex? Sarah asked. Bus station, downtown. I know this is crazy. I know you don't. Stay there, Sarah said, already grabbing her keys. I'm coming. You are? Someone once showed up for me when I was terrified and alone, she said, fastening Walter's ring around her neck. Taught me that showing up is what matters. So yes, I'm coming. She heard the boy sob with relief. Thank you, God, thank you. What's the address? As Alex gave her directions, Sarah caught her reflection in the window, a woman transformed by grief into something stronger, kinder, more purposeful. She wasn't the same nurse who dialed a wrong number in panic. She was the answer now. This is what redemption looks like. Not perfect endings, but continuing in the fight. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and share it, because someone out there needs to hear that showing up matters. 2 hours later, Sarah found Alex huddled on a bench outside the station. 17, terrified, trying to look brave and failing. She sat beside him, handed him coffee she'd bought on the way. You came, he whispered, disbelief in his eyes. I came, she confirmed. Walter said you would, said this number reaches someone who understands what it's like to be scared and alone. Sarah smiled through tears. He was right. They sat in silence, two strangers connected by a ghost who'd learned compassion too late to save himself, but just in time to save others. What happens now? Alex asked. Now I help you disappear. Get you somewhere safe, help you start over. Sarah stood, offering her hand, the way someone once did for me. Alex took her hand, and in that moment, Walter's redemption became complete. Not in his death, but in the life it inspired. As they walked to her car, Sarah's phone glowed in her pocket. She pulled it up, looked at the number that had started everything. The same digits David Chen had whispered. The same digits she'd dialed in terror. The same digits that had reached a man who taught her that salvation isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up. She saved the contact, renaming it one final time. The night fate answered. Because sometimes the wrong call at 3 a.m. isn't a mistake. It's the universe dialing the right heart. Thank you for taking this journey. If this story touched you, changed you, made you believe in second chances, share it, subscribe, and remember, you never know when your phone will ring with someone who needs you to show up. When it does, answer. Sarah drove into the night, carrying Walter's legacy forward, one lost soul at a time. And somewhere in the wind off the ocean, she swore she heard him whisper, "Thank you for staying." What did you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Did this ending wreck you, heal you, make you want to answer the next call that comes? Let me know below. And if you want more stories like this, raw, real, emotionally devastating, subscribe and turn on notifications. Your next favorite story is one click away.